Well, hello again. As has already been indicated, yesterday was International Women's Day, and so we're following through on that idea in our service today. And in the message, I want to answer 3 questions. And the first question I want to answer is, why do we need International Women's Day? Because from where you sit, you might kind of think, well, women are pretty good here, aren't they? We look after our women in New Zealand. And as I have mentioned to a few people during the week, this is what we're doing, I have overwhelmingly had a response that went along the lines of, why do women get all the good days? When's the men's day going to be? Why do we get to do this for the women? I know. And whilst these things have been said a little bit jokingly, I do want to address that because it could be that there are some men here today and you're not entirely comfortable with where this might be going. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And if you are nervous, I want to assure you that International Women's Day does not mean let's bash up on all the men today day. This is not about being down on the men. We love the men. We need the men. We do. We need everybody. Let me tell you what this day is about, just to allay any concerns. Today is about men and women joining together to look out for our vulnerable people. That's what it's about. And I'm going to show you some statistics shortly. And what those statistics will show you is that in so many places, it is the women who are more vulnerable. God asks us to care for the vulnerable. That's what is behind this. So we're going to talk about why we even need the day to start with. We're going to talk about why I think Christians should be part of this day, but not just for the sake of the day, because of the cause behind it in an ongoing way. I think it's something we need to get behind. And finally, we're going to say, well, what can I do then? What difference can I make? So that's where we're heading. I hope that's all right with you because that's where we're going. And in order to answer that first question, why do we need International Women's Day, we've got a clip that we're going to play in just a minute. And that clip might just have a couple of familiar voices on it.
Around the globe every year on the 8th of March, International Women's Day is celebrated. The day is a call to action encouraging everyone to stand up for women's rights and gender equity.
But why do we need International Women's Day?
I know women didn't have the same rights as men, but that's all changed now, hasn't it?
Well, yes and no. Over the past 150 years, things have changed a lot for women. We can now vote, stand in Parliament, own property, be paid the same as men, and have the same education as men. But still, globally, we are not where we should be.
Gender equity means that regardless of your gender, you have the same rights, privileges and opportunities as everyone else. Still, in the world today, there are countless women and girls who are denied fundamental rights, opportunities and safety.
In 2024, 17 countries had laws that limited a woman's movement, both within her community and across international borders.
4 countries required a woman to have a man's permission to sign a contract or open a bank account.
36 countries had laws that limited what a woman could inherit.
104 countries had laws that put certain jobs off limits for women.
Honour killings, where women are doused in kerosene and set ablaze or burned with acid for disobedience, take the lives of thousands of young women every year.
In some cultures, infant girls do not receive the same medical care and attention as boys, simply because they are girls.
A gender pay gap is found all around the world. In the European Union, men are paid 15% more than women for the same work. In Latin America, it's 51%. In New Zealand, it's 8.2%, better than most places, yes, but it's still 8.2%. There is still a gap. We haven't reached equity yet.
In 2024, there were 47 countries in which there are no repercussions for husbands who rape their wives.
45 countries which do not have specific laws against domestic violence.
And 30% of women globally have experienced sexual or physical violence in their lifetime.
The United Nations estimates that women perform 66% of the world's work and produce 50% of the food, yet earn only 10% of the world's income and own 1% of the world's property.
Globally, women aged 15 through 44 are more likely to die from male violence than from cancer, malaria, traffic accidents and war combined.
In the world today, there are still countless women and girls who are denied fundamental rights, opportunities and safety.
And while things are changing, they are changing slowly. If they keep changing at the same rate they are now, it will take until 2158 to reach global gender equality. That's 5 generations from now.
That's too long.
That's too many women and girls who will be denied fundamental rights, opportunities and safety while we wait for things to change.
We need International Women's Day to tell the world this is not okay.
We need International Women's Day to shine a light on this important subject.
We need International Women's Day to stand up for the women and girls in the world who are unable to stand up for themselves.
So on the 8th of March this year, will you stand with us?
I wonder if some of that was new information for you. Would anyone like to call out any words about how they respond to those statistics that you just witnessed? Ashamed. Angry. Yeah. Disappointed. Yeah.
Unfair.
What's that?
Unfair.
Okay, thank you. Shocking. It is, isn't it? Yeah. It is shocking. I think it's right. We should feel we should feel something, shouldn't we, when we see that? I showed that to someone during the week actually, and her response was, I wish I could say I was shocked. And I thought, that's even more sad, isn't it? Because she kind of just knew that was happening, that was the situation, and she wished she felt more shocked. You might perhaps just feel a bit sad and depressed about that. I wonder if anyone watching felt disbelief, like you felt, Carla has got those numbers wrong. Surely it's not that bad. Did anyone feel a little bit of that? Because I want to tell you, I did my research properly and I put all my sources at the end there because I felt like that couldn't be right. So I made sure I did my homework. Those numbers are absolutely right as of the end of last year. I wonder if any of us, though, might have felt, that's really terrible, but at least it's not like that in New Zealand. Like, that's happening for some other people over there, further away, and that's really bad for them, but at least we're better than that in New Zealand. Maybe there was a little bit of that in there. Because we are pretty good in New Zealand, aren't we? I mean, heck, we're the first country to give women the vote. Yay us. We've had 3 women prime ministers. Women absolutely have a voice in this country, and that's something to celebrate. We have lots of laws set up around the protection of women. Women are looked after in this country. Women have rights. We can move and travel freely. We can have an education. We can have any job that we can get. We can own property. Absolutely fantastic that we have all of those things, but we are not all good, even in New Zealand. Our rates of violence towards women, abuse towards women, are higher than the average around the world. It said there, I think it said 30% of women have experienced violence or sexual abuse. So the statistics around the world globally, it's 1 in every 3 women will experience abuse in their life. In New Zealand, family, it is 1 in every 2. In fact, it is more than that. It is 55% of women will expect to experience abuse. Now, that could be sexual, physical, or psychological abuse in their lifetime. That's terrible. It's appalling. It's happening in New Zealand. And if it's happening to 1 out of every 2, it means it's happening all around all of us. And we just might not know. The New Zealand Police in 2023 had 176,000 calls made in relation to domestic violence. That's a massive number, and by the way, domestic violence isn't only against women, it can be against men too, but the majority is against women. It had just under 200,000 calls. The people who work in this area will tell us that they think around 85% of incidents are never reported. Just sit with that maths for a minute and have a think about how frequently this is happening. Violence against women is happening in New Zealand. It is not happening just over there somewhere. It is happening here, and it is not right. Our God is a God of justice, and justice is about putting things right. It's about things being as they should be. And this is why I believe that Christians need to not only get behind the day of International Women's Day, we need to get behind the cause, the thing that it's all about every day of the year. God wants fair and equal treatment of all human beings. And we see this many times, particularly in the Old Testament. And one example here is from Deuteronomy. We see that God has a special place for the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner or the alien in the land. Now, why was it that it's those 3 groups that often he's telling people to look out for? It's because they were the vulnerable people. Those people in the land had no voice. They had no rights. They had no protection, and as a result, they were often taken advantage of, and they could do nothing about it. And so God said, He's a God of justice, and he said to his people, you need to look after those people. You need to reflect my quality of justice, and you be their voice. You make sure they're fed. You make sure they are protected. God required of his people back then, and I believe he still requires it of his people today, that we should act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. We can find passages even in the Old Testament where God has, through the prophets, judged his people for the way they treated others. God was angry with his people if they were not looking out for the vulnerable amongst them, because how we treat people matters to God. God is a God of justice, and we, his people, are called to reflect that quality. God is also a God of love, and he has no favourites. He shows no partiality, and you can't bribe him. You can't say, God, if I come to church every Sunday this year, you'll like me a bit more, won't you? You'll answer my prayers a bit more. It does not work like that. God loves us all equally. And you know, he loved us all so much that Jesus should come and die for the world. Not for one group of people or another group of people. All of us. Jesus came to die for, because he loves us all that much. There is no Jew or Gentile, no slave or free, there is no male or female. We're all one in Jesus. You see, your race doesn't make you any more or any less valuable. Your place in society doesn't make you any more or any less valuable. Your sex does not make you any more or any less valuable. We are all human beings. We are all loved by God. And God is love, and we are called to reflect that quality to those around us. Male and female, both made by God, both made in the image of God, both given the Spirit of God, and both given responsibility to care for creation. It seems so obvious, doesn't it, when you come back to this? And I know this is the Salvation Army. Women have always had a voice in the Salvation Army, and I celebrate that right from the beginning. Women have been part of the team and equal in every way. So I know I don't need to explain that to all of you. But the question is then, if it's so obvious that there should be equality, how did we end up here? How did we end up in 2025 when we are so advanced in so many ways, when we live in a planet where there are 47 countries right now where there are no repercussions for a husband who rapes his wife, where a woman's body is not her own? How can we still have that happening? How is it that women do 66% of the work but get 10% of the pay and own 1% of the property? How is this right? How is it right that in 104 countries, women do not have the freedom to work in any job that they would want? Because you see, when we limit women's ability to work, we make her more vulnerable. We take away some of her independence, some of her ability to provide for herself and her family. And I looked up the numbers around that 104 countries where there are limitations legally on what a woman can do for a job. That impacts 2.7 billion women. And if that sounds a lot, because I thought it did, and I thought there's only 8.2 billion people in the world, how can that be wrong? It must be wrong. It's not. I checked. So how did we get here? How did we get here? And there could be lots of answers. I wonder if it could go right back to Eve in the garden. And when Eve, as the woman, she sinned first, didn't she? She brought sin into the world. And is that something that has followed women since, perhaps? That women are the scapegoat, it's their fault. Is there some of that thinking underlying, and perhaps we're not even aware of it anymore? How much of it is about the fact that women are generally smaller and physically weaker than men? And women carry the children and they have to nurture the children for that first part of a child's life. How much of it is about that? Very practically speaking, women were vulnerable and they needed some extra protection, but that's somehow become oppressive and abusive. There's all kinds of interesting thinking from different parts of the world, and one that particularly interested me was the Greek philosopher Aristotle. So he's about 400 or 500 years behind Christ, and if, like me, you're brought up in a Western mindset, I think there can be Greek ideas that have filtered through that we don't even know about. And Aristotle, he's something else. He thought that this is how it worked. When a woman has a baby, all the genetic material is passed on by the father, and all the woman does is grow that baby. If the woman can grow that baby well and does a good job, it will be a boy. If the woman is defective in the way she grows the baby, i.e. her body is not the right temperature or something like that, there will be a mutation, the baby will be deformed, it will be a woman. Okay, I thought you might laugh at that because it's pretty funny, but you're all shocked. Yes, it is shocking. You're going, how could you think that? But this is behind Greek thinking, which has filtered through to us. So if that's how you think it went with Aristotle, well, woman's inferior from the beginning, isn't she? There's nothing she can do about it. She's always going to be second class. Maybe there's some ideas like that and we don't even know, but they still perhaps impact us. I wonder if we've misunderstood some of the passages in the Bible that speak about the place of woman. And this is one verse that I find really interesting. It's right at the beginning. So Adam is made and God needs to make a helper suitable. And people have often looked at this helper suitable and thought, well, he's made, he just needs an assistant. She's like his servant there. She's just there to help him. And you could read it like that. But when you look into the word Isa, which is what is translated here, helper suitable, what you find is that word is used 21 times in the Old Testament, and 16 times it describes God's relationship with Israel. Now, God's not Israel's assistant. God's not Israel's little helper who's kind of second rate. No, what this word encompasses is ideas like strong ideas, like defender, protector, someone who will surround and cherish and love you. And the idea of help absolutely comes into that, but it's not the whole word. Does that make sense? So perhaps there's ideas like that and many other ideas that have helped us to get to where we are now. Perhaps too there's been lots of habit and tradition and even cultural things that after year after year after year have simply gone unquestioned. And we need to be brave enough to go back and go, now, why is it that we do that thing that we do? However it is that we've ended up here, here is the place we've ended up. And whilst things are changing, they are changing very slowly. So over the past 130 years, yes, women have got the vote and women have been able to do lots of wonderful things. But if we keep changing at the same rate we are now, it will take about another 130 years for all of those legal things that you saw up there, for that gender pay gap and thing to be even out. If we continue at the same rate, it will take to 2158. That is 5 more generations from now. And when you start thinking about some of those women who are stuck in those situations, that's a lot more women who are going to be vulnerable and disadvantaged because we are not at equality yet. So how can we accelerate change? How can we care for the vulnerable? How can we reflect God's love and justice? Well, this is a big issue, but I want to encourage you that there are small things that we can do. I've got 4 suggestions. Here's the first one. We can think about where we shop. Now, I don't know about you, but I do love a bargain, and so this is a struggle for me, but I challenge myself and everyone here to shop ethically. Support the places that pay their women or pay their workers a fair wage, because overall when people are paid less, it tends to be the women who are the ones who are paid less. And so if we're supporting companies that are paying their workers well, we are going to be helping women, and in turn we're going to help whole families and whole communities. So that's one thing. Maybe just even in one area of your life, maybe just as you come up to Easter this year, think about where you're going to buy your chocolate. Think about shopping in one area. Just change one thing even to shop more ethically, because that will help women. We can think about how we vote. We can let our politicians know what is important to us and then hold them to account. We can find out where their priorities are. How much do our politicians really care for the vulnerable? How much are they caring for those with no voice? Because a lot of that stuff that needs to change is legal. And so we want to make sure that those that have no voice are having their voices heard by those who have the power in this country. We can think about the planet. We can care for the planet. Did you know that global warming and natural disasters disproportionately impact women? Did you know about that? Because I've not thought about it like that until recently, and I've read some amazing information and very disturbing information, and if anyone would like to have a look at it, I'll give it to you after. But let me just give you one example about how this happens. So, 1 in every 4 homes on the planet does not have running water. So that means that it is someone's job in the family every day to walk to the stream or to the well and back and bring the water. And in 80% of those communities where they have to fetch the water, water fetching is women's work. So it'll be the tweens and young teenage girls who have the job of getting the water for the family for the day. If it takes half an hour to go and get the water and half an hour to go back, well, that might be manageable. But what happens when that well dries up because there's a drought? What happens when that stream that you got your water from is no longer there and you suddenly have to walk 2 hours to get the water so your family can live, and then 2 hours home? Let me tell you what happens. She stops going to school. And what happens when she stops going to school? Suddenly her choices become a lot smaller. She is then more likely to get married earlier, and we're talking about our tweens and young teenage girls getting married. That makes them very vulnerable. She's likely to start having children earlier. Health-wise, then that makes her very vulnerable. So, caring for the planet, it might not seem like perhaps it's a very direct way for caring for our women, but it is, because these extreme weather situations can take away women's choices and their options and make them more vulnerable. My 4th point, what can you do? You can think about your own neighbourhood. You can get to know your own neighbours. If 1 in every 2 women in New Zealand are going to experience abuse, that means it is happening in our neighbourhoods. It is happening all around us. And so maybe this Easter you could get yourself some ethically sourced chocolate and go knock on the door of your neighbours. No one's not going to welcome you if you've got chocolate. And take it as an opportunity to just connect and say, this is who I am, and start to build a relationship so that they will know that you are a safe person. A few weeks ago, a couple of ladies in my neighbourhood had some very good reason to be concerned about another lady in the neighbourhood, and the 2 of them got together and they kind of thought, what should we do? Should we do anything? We don't want to interfere. But they had a good reason to. And so in the end, they decided they were simply going to go to that woman and ask her if she was okay. So they did that, and actually she told them that she was okay and she's fine, and she didn't appreciate them coming. But, you know, they told me about the story later, and I said to them, you did the right thing though, because you never know what might come out of that conversation. It might be in a year, it might be in 10 years' time, it might be never, but who knows if later on something will happen for that lady, and she is going to know that there are 2 women in her street who cared enough to ask her if she was okay. And she'll know that they are safe people to go and talk to. They did the right thing by simply checking up on her, and it really wasn't that big a thing to do. It's not really that hard to just say, "Are you okay?" Just to check in. And I want to check in with all of you today. Are you okay? Because if it's 1 in every 2, and that's of women, and we acknowledge that this happens to men as well, then it's not just in our neighbourhoods, it means in this room. There are men and women who have suffered abuse or who are suffering from abuse right now. And you might not even know that it's abuse. It just might feel like they're very controlling. They seem to be manipulating me, and there's some mind games going on, and it just doesn't feel right. I want you to know that this is a safe place. I want you to know that God loves you. I want you to know that God cares about putting things right. And if you need to talk to someone today and let them know that you are not okay, then you can speak to me, or you can speak to Michelle or Stu before you leave today in complete confidence, and we'll be there to support you. So we're going to start wrapping up now, and we've got a song that we're going to sing, and it's a song that encourages us towards action. Thoughts and prayers are good, but we want to be more than just thoughts and prayers. And so as we sing, I invite you to be open to examine anything in your life that might have gone unquestioned. Maybe there's things back from generations and they've just kind of become part of your life, but actually you need to unpack that. You need to throw some of that stuff away perhaps. I invite you to consider who the vulnerable people are in your circle. And I invite you to reflect on the love and the justice of God and how it is that we can each reflect that.